What sounds like fiction, but is actually a real historical event. Edgar Allan Poe wrote a novel in 1838 in which 4 shipwrecked survivors, at the point of starvation, choose to resort to cannibalism. So they kill the young cabin boy, Richard Parker, and eat him. In 1884, a ship called the Mignonette sank. 4 crew members survived. At the point of starvation, they killed and ate the youngest of them, Richard Parker. The inspiration for the tiger's name in Life of Pi. I died laughing when I heard the actor that played the older Pi in Life of Pi said the name Richard Parker, Spider-Man's dad's name, in The Amazing Spider-Man 2. The Soviet scientists starving to death saving the seed bank of Leningrad during Hitler's invasion in the winter of 1941-42 despite it being full of corn, wheat and potatoes. What happened? They ran out of food, but couldn't eat anything from the seed bank, since they needed to preserve its stocks. Wojtek was a bear who fought Nazis in return for cigarettes and beer. He didn't die until 20 years after WW2. My favorite part about that story is that after the war he lived in a zoo. It was common for soldiers from the bear's company to come visit and simply jump into the enclosure to play with him, much to the zookeeper's annoyance. That is so cool. I hadn't heard that part of the story before. The escape from Antarctica by the members of the Antarctic expedition led by Ernest Shackleton. The stuff they went through was unbelievable. Their boat, the Endurance, was crushed by ice floes. They were stranded on the floes for over a year in temperatures well below freezing. They then took to 3 boats around 22 feet in length across the Antarctic Ocean looking for land. There were about 10 men in each boat. They missed reaching land by just a few miles at times. 2/3 of them got stranded on Elephant Island surrounded by ice, while one of the boats went out in search of rescue. That boat made it through the Drake Buttage, one of the deadliest places in the ocean. All but 3 of them got stranded with little food and water, while the 3 men who left became the first people to cross South Georgia on foot. They found civilization, rescued the men who came through the Drake Buttage, waited months until they could rescue those on Elephant Island. Every single person who came on the initial voyage survived, with the worst lasting consequence being a single foot amputation. I'm shocked that this has not been made into a major movie or mini-series. There is a fantastic documentary called The Endurance. The trip was partially funded through shooting wildlife footage, so they happened to have cameras. Unbelievable images of their experience. Highly recommend it. President Andrew Jackson's funeral in 1845. His pet parrot had to be removed because it was swearing loudly. And he also left a giant rotting cheese wheel to his successor Van Buren. He had received 2 as a gift, and he held a giant party in the White House where people could just show up and drink and eat of the first 1,200 pounds cheese wheel gift. But the other remained in the cellar for 2 years till Van Buren took over. Don't underestimate cheese. A 72-pound wheel of Parmigiano Reggiano sells for about $900. Properly cared for, that could have been a literal fortune's worth of cheese. An English king named Ethelred, later called the Unready, took some troops to defend against a Viking invasion. The weather was bad, so a lot of the Vikings' ships crashed as they were landing. Ethelred thought that it would be dishonorable to attack them as they were stumbling onto shore. So he kept his troops back until the Vikings had a chance to get together and form proper battle lines before he attacked them. The better prepared Vikings then won the fight and slaughtered a bunch of Ethelred's men, and he and the rest were forced to run away while the Vikings went around pillaging. Also, his sobriquet does not mean unready in the modern sense, as in unprepared, but rather ill-advised. Ethelred, the name meaning well-advised. A hilarious pun. There are 3 separate defenestrations of Prague. The word defenestration was coined to describe the third one. The defenestrated parties survived in the third one. The Catholics claimed angels helped them down. The Protestants claimed they landed on a dung heap. Historians think they survived because they were only on the 2nd floor. To this day, political protests in Prague often involve defenestrating someone in effigy. The defenestrated parties survived in the third one. The third defenestration happened 1948 and is a name for the suspicious death of Jan Masaryk. You're referring to the second defenestration. Jean de Clisson, 1300 to 1359, was married to a French nobleman who was beheaded for treason by the French king. Enraged, she sold their estate and purchased 3 black warships with red sails, and became a pirate queen of the English Channel who targeted French ships. She became known as the Lioness of Brittany, and in her 13 years of piracy she would slaughter every member of a ship's crew except for one, so that last survivor could go back and tell the French king what had happened. Why do I feel like the 1300s never get talked about? Due to a military standoff that took years, 15 ships became stranded in an inland sea, and over 8 years formed a multinational ship-based society that even included its own currency. Louis XIX was king of France for 20 minutes. The shortest war ever recorded was around 40 minutes long. During the Salem witch trials, dogs were also accused of witchcraft. 2 dogs were executed because of it. Was the 40-minute war between the British and natives of the island of Zanzibar? Yes. It's clocked at between 38 to 45 minutes. A Russian Tsar had a bomb thrown at him, avoided it, and thought it was a good idea to stay there to look at the damage. Enter second guy with bomb. Butterman, you mean Alexander III. Lenin himself watched the execution of his brother in a slightly earlier but a nation attempt. It was Alexander II. The Roman Emperor Caligula once declared war against Neptune, god of the ocean. He led his soldiers to a beach and instructed them to stab the water. Would have won, too, had he recruited the Sand Guardian. Joshua Norton was just this random crazy guy from San Francisco who hated all this political nonsense that was going on at the time and figured he could do the job better at it himself. And thus the Emperor of the United States and Protector of Mexico was born. While he held no real power, the people liked him so much that they treated him like royalty anyways. Any currency issued under his name was treated like real money at many establishments. One day, he was arrested by a private security force because of his mental health, which enraged practically all of San Francisco. The police chief let him go because he had committed no crime, and Norton gave an imperial pardon to the guy who arrested him. After this incident, any police officer Norton butted would salute him. Another time, when a riot had formed and was getting pretty violent, Norton simply stood in front of the mob and calmly prayed, which managed to disperse the mob, and that's not even a fraction of the crazy stuff that he did. So, you're telling me the Emperor of San Francisco from Christopher Moore's books is real? Did he have 2 dogs as well? He was also referenced in Sandman as the Emperor of Ice Cream. Not sure about the dogs. In 2007 a piraglida got trapped in the updraft of 2 joining thunderstorms and was lifted to an altitude of 33,000 feet. She landed over 3 hours later about 60 kilometers north of her starting position, having survived extreme cold, lightning and lack of oxygen. That sounds scary. Imagine spending 3 hours in the sky and not being able to get back down. She was unconscious for most of it, thankfully. The Great Mulebutts Flood of 1919. A tank filled with 2-meter gallons of mulebutts burst and sent a tidal wave of mulebutts through the streets of Boston. 21 people were killed. Imagine standing in the streets as a tidal wave of mulebutts approaches and just thinking to yourself, well, I guess this is how it ends. Death by mulebutts. Sergeant Stubby. During World War I, a soldier found a stray dog when training on the Yale University campus and took a liking to him. The soldier snuck the dog onto the ship when he had to leave campus, and when the dog was found by the commanding officer, he was allowed to stay because he had learned how to salute. Stubby was injured a few times during the war, but he was useful with alerting his squad of surprise mustard gas attacks and gunshots before the human ear could detect the sound. He also found and comforted wounded soldiers and caught a German soldier by the leg of his pants until American soldiers got to him. Aka, the best test boy to ever live. Reminds me of the Polish bear who fought in WWII and was promoted to corporal. Watch Tech, who smoked cigars and carried shells. Edit, ate cigarettes as a fellow redditor pointed out. Edit 2, he also drank beer, according to other redditors. During WW1 the German Navy built a ship and painted it to make it look like a British ship called the RMS Carmania in order to infiltrate and destroy British convoys. On the ship's first outing, the first enemy it encountered was the real RMS Carmania, which promptly sunk it. Spider-Man meme. In 1971, a teenage girl named Julian Cope was on a plane that was struck by lightning and disintegrated in the air. She plummeted 3,000 meters strapped to her seat and landed in the Amazon rainforest. Her mom had been on the flight with her, and Julian searched in vain for her mom. But Julian was the sole survivor of the crash. She survived 11 days alone, treating her maggot-infested wounds with fuel and using tracking techniques her father had taught her before she found a boat that she used to make her way back to civilization. What an absolute legend. Edited for clarity. Close bracket. Plane that was struck by lightning and disintegrated in the air. Lightning can do that. Lightning can't do that anymore. Most planes today are struck by lightning at least once per year. They need some maintenance to replace static strips or small burns in the metal, but it doesn't cause crashes. Planes weren't as safe in 1971, especially in South America. The East German balloon escape. In 1979, two families escaped East Germany to West Germany by a homemade hot air balloon. Edited for redundancy. There's a couple great escapes, like when the border was still new and some geniuses got past by lowering a convertible until it was shorter than the gate's arm and just gunned it through the checkpoint. Also, some people showed their Playboy Club cards because they were confused with diplomatic budports. The death of Ken Rex McElroy. He terrorized Skidmore, Missouri for decades, stalking, butt-alting, murdering and raped two 14-year-olds who were his wives. He had an expensive attorney, so he was never charged. The law never helped the poor town. One day, the town gathered for a meeting on how to deal with McElroy. Details get a little vague here, but apparently someone alerted the room that McElroy was in the bar up the street. Quietly and calmly, everyone got up and walked over to the bar. As McElroy got into his truck, someone shot him in the back of the head. The town just went back to their business. When the witnesses, like the entire town, were questioned, everyone claimed they didn't see anything. No one has ever been arrested. Makes me think of the ending to Roadhouse. Just needs a taxidermied bear. In 1980, Lake Pigner in Louisiana drained like a bathtub with the plug removed. Oil drillers on a rig in the lake had hit a mine shaft below the rig. Barges, a tugboat and part of a nearby island got sucked into the largest man-made whirlpool ever. It was a salt mine, and nobody died. The dancing plague of 1518. People left their friends behind. It was terrible. That dance isn't as safe as they said it was. Spartan weddings. Basically, young Spartans would train 4 years in camps, surrounded only by men. So, when the time came for marriage, the women would shave their heads and dress in men's clothing, since the idea of having sex with anyone other than a man weirded out the grooms. I don't know, man, sounds a little gay to me. A lot of gay actually. Not exactly historical, but a poodle named Catchy, in Caballito, Buenos Aires, fell from 13 floors and fatally hit 75-year-old Marta Espina, killing both instantly. In the course of the events, 46-year-old Edith Sala, who came to see the incident, was fatally hit by a bus. An unidentified man, who witnessed Edith's death, had a heart attack and also died. On his way to the hospital, Edith Sala, who came to see the incident, was fatally hit by a bus. Did this woman have fortune-telling powers and just use it to witness hilarious deaths? Obviously not, or she would have been able to avoid her own. Mad Jack Churchill, the man with the only confirmed longbow kill in WWII. Guy and his squad did a death march towards the Germans while playing bagpipes. Got captured and sent to a concentration camp. He then escaped, got caught again, and then escaped a different concentration camp. Also, he always carried a Scottish longsword with him. There's so much other weird shit he did after the war, and it's amazing to me that is entirely real. The Christmas truce of 1914 in WW1. In 1993 a man taught geese to follow his ultralight aircraft glider. They didn't know how to migrate, so he flew all the way to an area where geese generally migrate to with his geese following. This is a movie called Fly Away Home. Bulgarian swineherd, King Ivalo the swineherd, became a king and won a battle against the trained army of the current king of that time. Harold Holt, the PM of Australia, went for a swim in the ocean in 1967 and was never seen again. When you read the real John Brown story, from Kansas to Harper's Ferry, it just doesn't seem real. Fundraising, Canada, clandestine fundraising, religion, asking everyone to join, betrayal by friends, martyrdom, etc. John Wilkes Booth was at his execution, and part of the army forces sent to capture him were Robert E. Lee and Jeb Stuart. And Brown worked closely with Harriet Tubman on the Harper's Ferry raid. Probably that time the US government hooked listening equipment to a cat so it could spy on Russians, only to realize that cats don't follow commands, and then it got hit by a car. In 1985 Philadelphia police bombed a residential neighborhood. The resulting explosion destroyed 2 city blocks, killing 5 children and 6 adults. I watched that fire from my house just outside of West Philly. I'm shocked at how many people have no knowledge of the 5th largest city dropping a bomb on itself that resulted in the deaths of 11 citizens and the destruction of 61 houses. Hey, thanks so much for watching. If you want more videos, don't forget to like and subscribe. You are helping me a lot. Thanks again.